Welcome to Smart Branding, a podcast dedicated to branding, naming, and domain names. I'm Tatiana Bonneau, and with my guests, we try to help you create and grow strong, memorable, and meaningful brands online. I believe time is one of our most precious assets, and so I want to thank you in advance if you decide to spend the next 30 minutes with us. I promise to do my best to make those worth it. Let's go! My guest today is Alexandra Watkins. She's a leading and outspoken authority on brand names, author of Hello, My Name is Awesome, which I'm sure like most of you have at least heard of, and generally a go-to source for leading branding and naming agencies globally. Hi, welcome, and thank you for making the time, Alexandra. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So I've read your book, and as I just mentioned, I'm sure anybody who has anything to do with naming has at least heard of it or read like at least some of it. Give me a little bit of a background. So how did you get into naming?
So I have an unusual background for a namer. I started my career as an advertising copywriter. And every once in a while, I would get thrown a bone and get to name something. And I love naming. But because I was in advertising, I had no idea that naming was actually a profession. And when I discovered that after being a copywriter for 16 years, I switched gears and just said, I'm going to be a professional namer. And I came out of nowhere and I just immediately started getting freelance work from Landor and Interbrand and strategic name development. So I started all of these, naming firms are putting their good name on my great names. So I realized I really needed to have my own naming firm, not just be a freelancer. So that's was the catalyst for Eat My Words.
Great. And how did you choose your own name? Let's talk about Eat My Words. How did you get to that?
That's a great question. So I started out, I was naming a lot of things that make people fat and drunk. Like I named the Wendy's Baconator. So the name just fit. The name fit.
That's a great story, and it's on that, what do you feel? And as you said, you've been doing this for some time, and you wrote a book if I'm not mistaken, in 2014. So that's
correct
in itself, like we're coming up to 10 years. How has naming changed over that period? How do you feel has it evolved?
Well, I think it's gotten harder because it's hard every year. It's harder and harder to get names that clear trademarking. And then of course, domain names, if people are insisting on an exactmatch.com domain name, of course, it's harder and harder to get those. Although now it looks like a lot of people are going towards TLDs. And the other thing is, obviously ChatGPT is changing everything. And I think that, people just follow trends like, oh, let's leave some vowels out or let's spell this a weird way. And that was one of the main reasons I wrote my book, was just to help people understand like how frustrating that is for people if your name should be frustration free. And so I'm just trying to help people avoid all the mistakes. And because people most people don't name things every day. And so they don't know they're not realizing all these pitfalls that their name will have. So I'm just trying to help people avoid that.
Absolutely. And I think it's very, we see naming like in daily lives as a very personal thing, if you like, even though it's still like a huge responsibility, like naming a kid, for example, like, that human being is going to live with that name for their whole life. But as you say, we don't do it often. And I think even on that level, many people don't actually realize like it has to be a project in itself. You have to give it the attention it deserves. And when you're talking about products, companies, services, there's so many things that you need to take into account. It's just crazy that people think you can just come up with it and it's okay.
Yeah, people don't spend enough time on it. And it's true. Like with the and that's why I always tell people, think of your own name. Like, How long have you had it? How many times has somebody seen, said, or, read your name over the course of your life? I mean, you can't calculate that and then think of your brand name the same way. And most people have a name that's hard for people to either pronounce or spell. And so I tell them, when you're starting out with a blank slate, don't give yourself any disadvantages.
Yeah, that's definitely a good advice. So you just mentioned like following trends wouldn't be a good idea. And I completely agree with you. And I think on top of the fact that trends are trends, I mean, what makes them trends is they go away. And then you're left with a name that is basically a giveaway of when your company started, which goes with all the baggage that goes with that. So that would be one thing not to do. Can you tell me, like, in your opinion, what are some other common mistakes that people make when naming their company?
Sure. And that's a great point, by the way. Your name does, if you have a trendy name, it dates you. Like, look at eHarmony, right? Like, that name is so dated. Or like anything that starts with an I, iMotors. It's just so, it's in the, a phi, anything that ends in a phi. So some common mistakes that people make are, well, I have the Smile and Scratch test that is my 12-point name evaluation test that's based on my philosophy. A name should make you smile instead of scratch your head. And SMILE is an acronym for the 5 qualities that make a name great. Scratch is an acronym for the 7 deal breakers. And if it makes you scratch your head, scratch it off the list. So, or makes other people scratch their head. And you have to be honest with yourself with these things about your name. So the S stands for spelling challenge. And we talked about that. It's just going to frustrate people. So we have, the test is free on our website. If you just go to eatmywords.com and click on test a name. So I see people taking the test all day long. And like yesterday, someone took the test and they had the name Accelerate, but it was spelled with an H in it. Like,
Oh, that's something, yeah.
Yeah, XCELER8. And that's just going to frustrate the F out of people. Oh, so yeah, don't do that. The C, copycat, a lot of people have copycat names, and that comes back to trends, right? They're just trying to be like somebody else. The R stands for restrictive, and that's when you have a name that fits you one day, but then you outgrow it and you're stuck with it. So you have to look into your crystal ball and make sure that your name will fit you no matter what you become. And the A stands for annoying. And that is, going back to the frustration factor. Does your name have a number in it? That, like we talked about Accelerate. So, is it spelled backwards? Are you just trying to be, because a lot of people think like, oh, I'm being so creative. And just because you're being creative doesn't mean it's a good idea. And let's see, SCRAT stands for tame. And that's just where your name is flat and descriptive and it's not standing out. You're kind of a wallflower fading into the background and no one can afford to be tame right now. And then the second C stands for curse of knowledge. And that is where you know what it means. Maybe the engineers know what it means, but you forget that your target audience doesn't know what it means. And often a good way to think of the curse of knowledge is the word foreign. Is it foreign to other people? Is it a foreign word? People that live in the United States are notorious for not knowing foreign languages, pronunciations, all of that stuff that, people from other countries know. And then finally, the H in Scratch stands for hard to pronounce. And not only should your name be intuitive to pronounce, it should be able to be, people should only pronounce it one way. Because when you have a name that's pronounced multiple ways, it dilutes your brand.
Absolutely. Definitely agree with all what you said, and very much could say that applies to domain names from my experience. And all of that. Like I have so many conversations with entrepreneurs who started with a name that had a descriptive word, and now they've outgrown that. Like they're offering more services, or they're opening to different markets, and they're like, it's in the name. Now we have to change the name. So that's very relevant. We talk about the timing as well. Let's talk about domain names. I'm absolutely can't not bring that up. And it's funny because I've read, I think you had an article, it's in the book as well, but you had an article that still is very popular about how people make bad choices about their brand name because they can get the matching.com domain.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously I work with people who have started on what we call compromise names and are looking to secure that exact brandmatch.com for a long list of reasons. So what is your experience with that?
Well, it's interesting that you said that. Yesterday I got briefed on a project, and the client, they just knew, like, all right, let's start. I've never heard that word, that phrase, compromise name, but yeah, they're willing to add a modifier. Most people are. They'll just add another word to it to secure the domain, and then hope that their company becomes wildly successful and that they can purchase the exact match domain name at some point. But one thing that I love that people do with domain names is when they're very clever and creative. So my favorite example is a smoked turkey company, and it has it's just a family name. It's a boring name. It's called Greenberg Smoked Turkeys. And Greenberg could be spelled with, B-E-R-G or B-U-R-G. So it's a difficult name for that reason. It's not particularly memorable, but their domain name is absolutely unforgettable. And I love to say it around Thanksgiving, and it's gobblegobble.com.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great creative way to do it. Yeah. I think it touches on what you mentioned with the name, where you're diluting the brand in a way when there is mismatch between, and that's across everything. I think, it's, if you have two different, as you mentioned, pronunciations of the same words, or I think when you talk about global companies, it gets harder and harder because you can have the same writing that a person from a different country would pronounce differently. I remember that it's not a brand, but when I got to France for the first time, and I was asking about Wi-Fi, like, what's the Wi-Fi password? Where is the Wi-Fi? And people are saying Wi-Fi. And I was like, what are they talking about? And the funny thing is, recently we left France, and I've got so used to saying Wi-Fi and not Wi-Fi that like in other countries, I was like, can I have the Wi-Fi password? And they're like, what? But yeah, so I think even though I do work with only .com domain names, and I have my reasons for that, I feel it's all about making the life of the customer easier, and the less friction you have on all levels, obviously, the easier it is for a brand to market itself, and word of mouth, generally, like the ease of use and access, etc. So that goes across everything, the domain name. And so if I'm for exact brandmatch.com domain names, is because I feel, because of the history of those names, it's just people don't have to put more effort to remember them. So in a way, if you can't afford that, I feel the example that you just mentioned, you're much better off doing that than trying to, modify whatever, or go with a name that actually you don't like and doesn't fit because you can't afford the domain.
Yeah. But, if you look at, like, Tesla for the first 13 years was at Tesla Motors.
Exactly.
Right. And if you had wanted to buy a Tesla, test drive a Tesla at that time, and you went to Tesla.com, you would have seen a very ominous looking website that said this site is owned by GandhiNet. And at that point, what would you have done? You wouldn't just give up. You would have just gone to your browser, gone to Google, and typed in, Tesla car, Tesla test drive, Tesla dealer. and you would have found it, and like, boom, you would have been there so quickly, and you wouldn't have even noticed what the domain name was. You just wouldn't, and you wouldn't care, and it wouldn't prevent you from buying a Tesla, and you wouldn't say, oh, like, I don't trust this company because they don't have an exact match domain name. And, Facebook was the Facebook, Dropbox was Get Dropbox, Basecamp was Basecamp HQ. So all of these companies have, I like to say, they went around the roadblock, right? They avoided the roadblock and just bought, square up. So yeah, it's just, people get so hung up, and they often start by looking for the domain name first. And I advise to find a great name first, and then get your domain, do your legal screenings, then get your domain name. Because people they spend so much time, and they spend a small fortune buying every single, and I know this is good for you, but they do buy a lot of domain names.
Oh, the type of domain names I work with, they don't buy a lot of this. Usually one name, and it's the perfect name, and that's very much actually avoiding having to buy all the other names, because when you have the exactbrandmatch.com, you don't worry about the rest because you are the one. But that is something that's been highlighted recently with my other guests as well on that topic. And we kind of keep getting to the same conclusion, which I guess means something, that I'm actually communicating with people as well on the phone, is a lot of people, and even I had a naming guest recently whose advice was something that I wouldn't have expected him actually to say. I think it was Aaron Hall from Siegel and Gale, and he was saying like, it's actually okay if people launch projects without being so fixed on the name, to get an idea, to get a feeling of what it is they're doing, have it form its own character, and then actually focus on getting right that name, because it may even evolve in that process. Like at the beginning, you're so excited and you're not even sure what is going to shape like. So yeah, let's talk about that. What do you feel is the right timing?
I totally disagree with that. Like, why would you want to spend a dime promoting anything that the name is going to change? And we have people all the time, well, we'll just launch with like a placeholder name, and then we'll come back and do the real name. Like, why? Why would you do that? I don't understand. Why would you then have to tell people like, oh, the name is changing, or it's just a placeholder? You're making excuses for it. Like, get a name that you love from the get-go. I mean, you're hiring attorneys, you are developing identity, branding materials. Like, I don't know. For me, I'm really surprised that came from any professional namer, especially someone at Siegel and Gale. That surprises me.
I'll double check, but I think it was him, and we were talking about that people at the beginning of the project are so excited about it that they don't have the right. They're not in the right space, and it's not the right. They don't know the project as well, if you like, and it could be we're talking about different timing in that process of launching a company. So yeah, on that, what do you feel is the right time for someone to come to someone like you? And also, what would the process be like? Is it, because there is obviously the book, like, can people just buy the book, read it, and name their company? Or is it better to reach out to you or somebody like yourself and do the do the project with them?
That's a great question. Well, every client that comes to me is someone who has read my book, really love the book, love my names, tried it on their own, and then just said, you know what, I came up with some using your book, but I know you can come up with better ones, or I'm too busy, you do it, or we're a big company, you do it. But I think the best time to come is after you have tried it on your own. And also if you have, because a lot of people run into, they can't get anything to clear legal. That happens all the time. That's why a lot of consumer packaged goods clients come to us, because they can't find anything. And we always can. I mean, look, it's not always easy. I will admit, we're naming wine right now. And yesterday the client said only one of the 10 names that they screened cleared, but that's normal. So, we just named a healthcare company, and a lot of names got killed in trademarking, but they ultimately got a name that they loved. So we try harder, like Avis. But yeah, so I would say make sure you have all of your strategy work done, so you are really clear on this is what my brand is, that you know the tone and personality of your name, that you know how your name would be used in a sentence, because that's really important to think about. I mean, I had a call with this client yesterday, and they have a lot of different things that their name could be, this style or this style. And then I had them in the brief write an acid test sentence. And just reading that sentence, I said, look, this sentence says exactly how you should be positioning yourself, which is what my gut reaction was anyway. Because sometimes a client can get too close to it. And it takes someone like me or another outsider to come in and look at it and say, this is what you need to be. So yeah, I think a good namer can help with strategy as well, and helping clients focus on the right thing and not get lost in the forest.
I think, that's definitely something that I see a lot, where people get too close, and especially with naming is something that's like maybe it happens where people just wake up with some super idea and that's it, but I think that is very, very rare. So at least in the naming experiences that I've been involved with, at some point it feels like your head is in a cloud, like there's just so much and you can't see things clearly.
Yeah, I think that's why it's good to have an objective test like the smile and scratch test. And also to, that's where, once you narrow it down, so we're looking at 3 named finalists, then you can ask yourself more questions, how does, what's the availability of the domain name? How does it appear in a Google search? Are there other things with that name? A lot of times we're naming things that a client might want to monetize the name. So, we're naming a frozen yogurt store and the client wants merchandise that they can sell. So, we're looking at a name like Spoon Me for a frozen yogurt store. That's going to sell a lot of t-shirts. So we look at things like that as well.
That's very funny. That's cool. What else did I want to ask you? What about personal brands? Do you work with that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, that's a great question. And I gotta say, the phrase personal branding makes me cringe. I guess it's like, really, like a person needs to have a brand, but I guess we all have our thing, right? Like with me, you're looking at me right now, you can see have a pink microphone. I'm wearing a pink sweater, I have pink fingernails. I got my pink Barbie Corvette behind me. What you can't see is I was Barbie for Halloween. I have the back of our house is painted. The back of our house is painted pink, but not the front. Not the front. So yeah, I guess that would be my personal brand is pink. But yeah, so here's what I tell people about personal brands. You should have a moniker. So, for instance, I worked with this guy named Bruce, and he bills himself as the father of cause marketing. And I said, "You're the cause father," and he loved that, and he owned it. And he has a card where he is, dressed up in a tuxedo, and he's, he looks like he's it's his favorite movie, by the way, which is just so random. But yeah, he's leaning into that. He owns it. Another woman that I know of, Lauren Vasquez, is an attorney that specializes in cannabis, and she calls herself the Fired Up Attorney. I worked with a real estate agent who is a former flight attendant. She's a bubbly blonde. She's very self-deprecating. And she was a flight attendant for years. She still loves to travel and talk about it. So her moniker is the Flighty Realtor. So if you can have a moniker, so it's not the name of your brand, but it's just how you position yourself, then that's great. You can call that part of your personal brand.
And I saw you have your own name as a domain name that goes to the Ethiopia.
I do. I do.
Would you advise people doing that? What are the thoughts behind that?
Yeah, well, for when I was a freelance copywriter, I was just using my own name, Alexandra Watkins. So I bought the domain name, and all these years later, and it's been over 20 years that I've owned it. And yeah, now it was really hard for me to give up my copywriting website because I love that website. But I thought, well, if anyone types in my name, I want it to redirect to Eat My Words. So I do that. But yeah, I tell people do a redirect if your name is hard to spell, or maybe there's a plural version, not a plural version. So if you can do a simple redirect, and people don't understand how seamless it is. Like no one even notices, they type in whatever they think your domain is, they get to your site, and they might not have even noticed that, oh, the domain name changed when I typed it in. So yeah, now I'm a big believer in that. Or if you're using a promotional domain name, so or just something to go to somewhere specific on your site. I think I have a pro name review because I'll do a professional name review. So that goes to the page, the checkout page for that. So yeah, names masterclass I own that goes to the area on my site talking about my masterclass. So if it's something really easy for people to remember, yeah, I recommend get the domain name for it.
I love for creative uses of domains, and that's something that many people don't think about, don't talk about, but actually bigger, more established brands, they have a lot of fun with it. And I mean, we've seen some examples of exactly as you just mentioned, like domain names dedicated to a particular marketing campaign or course or masterclass, and it's a really goes back to what I was saying earlier, making the ultimate goal is making users' life or customers' life easier. And yeah, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I believe if you have a phrase or a hashtag and you can turn that into a domain name. A couple other domain names that I love. I love peanut butter. And I was at the fancy food show one year, and there was probably more than a dozen peanut butter purveyors there. And I was going around trying them all. And I turned the corner and I saw this banner above a booth, and it said, ilovepeanutbutter.com. And I was like, oh, that's so easy to remember. And it was for a company called Peanut Butter and Co. And they own peanutbutterandco.com. But if you go there, it redirects to I love peanut butter, which is interesting, right? It's like the opposite of what people usually do. But the reason they do it is it's fun. If you work there, chances are you love peanut butter, and like, oh my gosh, I would love to have the email address, Alexandra at ilovepeanutbutter.com.
Right? Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. That is something that I think a lot of people underestimate when, and you could say that about names as well, where they're thinking about, okay, my target audience. What are your thoughts on the implications of a name on your team, so internally in the company?
Oh my gosh, huge. No, that's such a good question. I actually have a chapter in my book called Corporate Creativity that gives a lot of examples of just names for just beyond naming your team. So you could have an internal name for your team, right? So at Yahoo, their security division, they call the Paranoids. Like, it's so fun, right? Like, anytime you give someone a reason to love their job more, and it's like, it's free. Naming your conference rooms, it's free, right? I mean, what, you pay a couple bucks to have some nameplates made? So like, that's another example. So like at Etsy, they named some of their meeting rooms musician food mashups. So Fleetwood Mac and Cheese, Sushi and the Banshees, Oreo Speedwagon, right? Like, those are fun. And I give a lot of free examples of things that you could name your conference rooms. One of my favorite is tongue twisters, because like, give people childhood toys, dances. Let's meet in Funky Chicken. Like if you think about that, it's so much more fun. It just adds a little smile in the workday more than, let's meet in 23A. Or
absolutely.
The most popular conference room name in the world is Paris, because a lot of people name their conference rooms after cities, but that's not really exciting or interesting. Do fun things. But so yeah, name your team. Like look at companies that have fun names for softball teams or Toastmaster clubs. My favorite. So Toastmasters is an international organization that helps people with public speaking, leadership, and mainly speaking. And my favorite, there's so many great Toastmaster club names. My favorite in San Francisco at Pacific Gas and Electric is Electric Toasters. And at Bayer, they have the pharmaceutical company, they have an animal health division, and their Toastmaster club name is Sit, Stay, Speak. So yeah, have fun with names at work. I mean, gosh, companies have fun names for their internal divisions. So, or like corporate communications. So Disney's is called Yellow Shoes because of Mickey Mouse's shoes. So yeah, McDonald's is, oh God, it's yellow. I think, is it yellow 1, 2, 3, something like that? It's the Pantone color of the golden arches. A lot of people think it's from the dollar menu. Nothing was $1 anymore, but no, it's the Pantone yellow of the arches. So yeah, you can have fun. Any opportunity for you to have fun with names, have fun with names.
Love it. And I think it's hugely underestimated. And like you say, I mean, if it's just for like making people smile, that is already huge, and it can do so much more. It's great. I love it. And I think everybody should consider naming more things.
Yeah, I think, wait, I have to say one. Is it at Groupon? Groupon has really good conference names, and one of my favorites is This Used to Be a Forest. So yeah, they can be long, but let the employees get involved and vote. Like anything just to make your corporate culture more. And people forget, it's not just the employees, it's the people that are potential employees, the people that are visitors to your office. I remember doing a project for Riverbed Technology, and all of their conference rooms were named after fish. And I just thought that was so creative.
That's fun. Yeah, absolutely. You have, correct me if I'm wrong, a new edition of the book. The book has been, so what is new there?
In the new edition, it was the chapter on corporate creativity. I added, the original book was about 100 pages and this new one is 150, but there's no fluff. I really was very, how many of us have started business books and not finished them? But I designed my book so it's just the meat. There's no extraneous fluff. I even wrote a sentence about that in the foreword, which is called "What's New, Pussycat?" Again, like, it's not called a forward. It's called, it's not called, what's new. It's called What's New, Pussycat. So yeah, I even say, I say there's no extraneous fluff. And I wanted to say that would make a great name for a band, but I didn't, because that would be contradictory to me saying there's no extraneous fluff. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's pure, because I wanted people to be able to have like a how-to guide where they could read it and apply it and just start using it right away. There's no like history of names. It's not heavy. It's just light and fun. Like people, so many people say and it is, it's fun. It's funny. It will make you laugh out loud. Don't drink a milkshake while you're reading it, or it might squirt out of your nose. It's just a warning label. The book should have.
Yeah, you should have it. Put the milkshake down. Cool. What are your thoughts on, we did sort of touch on ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. I'm sure you, like everyone else, have started getting that scrolling on whatever social media or even getting emails and going, oh my God, not ChatGPT again.
If I get another email that says, I hope this email finds you well, that's every single ChatGPT, it's just an automatic. I should actually have that as a filter to go directly to trash. They're bad. ChatGPT for namers, the way that the area I've found it to be most helpful is to write the rationale of why is this a good name? Because I can articulate it, but ChatGPT can write paragraphs about it, which I love. It's great for brainstorming. The other day I was brainstorming Americana names for something, and I just put into ChatGPT, give me 100 words associated with the movie Top Gun, because that's very the spirit of America. And so it spit those out. So that's where I find it helpful. Coming up with names, not so much. There's some really bad names, still some really bad names, but if you know how to prompt it correctly, you can get some gems once in a while. But, it's not going to be able to tell you, to really deeply analyze a name the way that a professional namer could. But it certainly has been helpful.
So namers are not out of job yet.
Not yet, no. But I'm just looking towards the future of what's the land, because it changes so fast. And the way that I've seen it change really quickly is using on OpenAI, their image creator, Dolly. The other day, in April for Easter, I had it make me a picture of Jesus riding a chocolate bunny, and it was good, but then I did it a couple of days ago and it was completely different and so much better. And I was like, that's moving very rapidly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think I found what you said. I find the prompt you have to use it well, which is making all the difference then in the good output. And so it's gonna be more about people who were already good at what they're doing, and they can now accelerate that and do more and do better and quicker, etc., etc. I don't feel like if you were bad at naming or whatever it is your area of expertise, you're suddenly gonna be boom. That's not gonna fix it.
Yeah, but it makes me, now that you say that, I bet there's people on Fiverr that are now namers. Or
I'm sure.
What's that one crowdsourcing site? What's that one? There's a name crowdsourcing site. I can't think of the name of it.
All right.
And then, of course,
that's bad. If you can think of it.
That's really bad. But then the one that just makes me cringe is Brand Bucket. I call it Barf Bucket. It's a domain. It's a domain reseller. I'm sure you're familiar with it. The names are just so cringe. And it's really people are paying money for those. They're terrible.
I'm just checking if Barf Bucket is available, because I think that's a business opportunity there.
Well, I always say the only domain name that's not taken is Beige Kumquat. Because every color and fruit is taken, right?
I think the majority of dictionary words in more than just English, they're probably taken,
Yeah. How many domain names do you own?
Me personally, not many. We at Mark Upgrade, we manage domain portfolios, but I personally, I think everybody else, I'm going to have to admit, I have some names that I was oh, that's a great name. I'm going to do something with that, some idea of a project, and it's still sitting there 5 years later.
Yeah, I stopped buying them for that reason, because I would come up with a great name. Perfect Snowflake is one that I owned. I own Forcery, sorcery, but with an F, Forcery. I owned that for probably 15 years. And I finally just let it go, because the problem with being creative is you're really creative. You can come up with names, but unless you're trying to market them to someone, people aren't finding them. And also, I don't think there's the value in coming up with a name. Maybe it's a longer name, but it's very creative. But it's not being valued, because I know the way domains are valued is often length comes into play. And my feeling is it's better to have a long name that's memorable than a short name that's forgettable.
Or not easy to spell. That's another, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I look at these 4 or 5 letter, if you go on Brand Bucket and you look at 4 and 5 letter domain names, I mean, they're just impossible. They're just impossible. They look like games of drunken Scrabble.
I don't know. There was a book I was reading recently about usability, about website usability. And there was a good phrase there. It was like, design your website as if it's made for somebody who's like drunk and in a hurry. I'm like, yeah,
that's good. That's really good. I love that. That's really good.
Because the reality is, I read it and I was like, oh, that's a bit too much. And then I'm like, no, we all, you're on your phone, you have like a zillion things you're doing. You're very much at that level, I think.
That would be a fun focus group to do.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody get drunk and be in a rush. You understand these names?
There we go. And I think you won't have trouble finding participants for that one. Wonderful. Well, that's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Alexandra. We're going to include all the things that we mentioned as links in the write-up for the podcast so people can reach you. Thank you. Thank you for making this happen.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. I loved all your questions. It's so great to talk to another insider that is really super familiar with names. Yeah, I'm definitely calling you the next time I need a domain name.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of Smart Branding Podcast. Feel free to visit smartbranding.com for more information and reach out if you have any suggestions, questions, ideas, or just want to learn more about how a good domain name strategy can help you build a strong and successful brand. See you next time.